The wind swept across Iron Spur Arena, dragging dust and old memories across the packed dirt floor. The crowd buzzed with the energy of a summer rodeo evening, unaware that the event about to unfold would etch itself into the hearts of everyone present. In the holding pen, a beast snorted, massive, russet brown, his breath heaving in thick clouds. Hellspike, a name spoken with reverence and fear. He had thrown every rider who dared mount him. Every single one, except one man, and that man was now dead. Claire Bennett stood at the gate in silence, her hands trembling as she zipped up her late husband's rodeo jacket. The patches were faded, the fabric worn where his arms used to wrap around her in quiet moments after long rides. Big Luke Bennett had died in this very arena 2 years ago, and Claire hadn't set foot in a rodeo since. But something tonight had pulled her back, something she couldn't explain. And when they opened the gate for a ceremonial round, before the main event, she stepped out. A hush fell over the crowd. Murmurs rippled like wind through wheat. Claire didn't speak. She walked steadily into the arena, the jacket heavy on her shoulders, memories heavier still. She knelt in the dirt, the very same ground where Luke had taken his last breath, and looked up at the pen where Hellspike waited. No one had expected the beast to be let out. No one had expected what happened next. The gate clanged open. Dust flew. People gasped. Hellspike charged forward in a storm of muscle and fury, then stopped, dead in his tracks. He locked eyes with Claire. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Then something no one could explain happened. The massive bull dropped to his knees, his eyes fixed on the woman wearing Luke's jacket, as if recognizing something that lived beyond scent or sound. Claire's breath caught, tears breaking free. She reached out, touching his horn gently. His body, trembling only moments ago, went still beneath her palm. Behind the fences, seasoned cowboys and announcers stood frozen. No jokes, no jeers, just stunned silence. Some whispered prayers. Others blinked in disbelief. J.J. Jacobs, the event announcer, lowered her mic. Wade Harris, owner of the arena, dropped a clipboard in his hand. This wasn't part of the show. Claire, her voice barely above a whisper, spoke the words only Hellspike could hear. "You remember him, don't you?" The dust hadn't even settled when Sheriff Rick Dalton pushed through the crowd and stepped into the arena. His boots crunched over the soil as he made his way toward Claire, his eyes flicking between her and the still kneeling beast. "Claire," he said cautiously, keeping his voice low, almost reverent. "You need to come with me." Slowly, but Claire didn't move. Her hand was still resting on Hellspike's head, and the bull didn't flinch. It was as if they were sharing something no one else could see or understand. In the stands, Tommy Bennett had just arrived, unaware of what was unfolding below. He paused halfway down the bleachers, his jaw tightening when he saw his mother, in his father's old jacket, kneeling in front of the animal that had become rodeo legend. He hated the rodeo now, hated everything it had taken from them. And this looked like madness. He turned to leave, but stopped when the crowd gasped again. The bull was licking her hand. Back in the arena, Wade Harris exchanged a look with J.J. Jacobs, both unsure if this was a blessing or a curse. Wade cleared his throat and muttered, "This ain't natural." But J.J., voice shaking, leaned into the mic again. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you're witnessing is not a part of tonight's event. Please remain calm." Her words were weak, compared to the tremble in the air, that sense that something old and sacred had just been stirred awake. Claire finally stood, slowly, brushing dirt from her jeans. She whispered, "It's okay, boy. I know you remember him." Her eyes welled again, but this time she didn't cry. Hellspike rose too, mirroring her. Not a sound came from him. No snort, no stomp, just quiet obedience. Claire turned and walked toward the gate. The bull followed her. Every boot in that arena seemed nailed to the ground. Outside the gates, Marty Cunningham was already on her phone, whispering, "Something strange just happened here. Real strange." Hellspike, he bowed to Claire, like he was mourning. Too. She looked up as Claire walked past, her face pale but focused, as if she were walking back from a dream. Marty lowered her phone slowly. That night, whispers spread across Iron Spur and beyond. Some said it was a sign from Luke. Others swore there was more to the bond between that man and that bull than anyone had dared admit. But no one, not even Claire, was ready for the truth that was beginning to push its way back to the surface. The next morning, the smell of coffee and dust filled the modest Bennett ranch house. Claire sat alone at the kitchen table, her fingers wrapped around a chipped mug. Outside, the sun was climbing over the dry plains, but she hadn't slept. Not after what happened at Iron Spur Arena. Her mind kept returning to that moment. Hellspike, once untamable, kneeling before her like a grieving old friend. It wasn't just recognition. It was devotion. She'd seen that look before, but only in Luke's eyes. Upstairs, Tommy was packing. Not for a trip, for an escape. His duffel thudded against the wall as he yanked it off the shelf. He couldn't take it anymore. The rodeo circuit, the town's whispers, the way people looked at him like he was just a shadow of his father. And now his mom was out there playing some spiritual game with a bull that had nearly killed 3 men this season alone. "She's lost it," he muttered. "They all have." But even as he said it, something about Hellspike's silence the night before crept under his skin. At the dust-turned stockyard, Caleb Morris, the local large animal vet, replayed the video on his phone for the 5th time. The footage, captured by a rodeo fan, showed the moment Hellspike bowed and allowed Claire to touch him. Caleb narrowed his eyes. Bulls didn't do that, especially not this bull. He grabbed his notepad and scribbled something fast, then circled a date, March 18th, 2023. That was the day Luke rode Hellspike, and the last time the bull had looked anyone in the eye like that. Meanwhile, Claire found herself outside in Luke's old workshop. The place hadn't been touched in 2 years. Dust coated every saddle, every spur, every photograph on the wall. Her hands trembled as she opened a metal box marked "Private." Inside, she found letters and a small cassette tape labeled "For Claire, only if something happens." Her heart stopped. She hadn't known this existed. At Thunder Rock Ranch Rodeo, Wade Harris sat in a meeting with event sponsors, distracted. He couldn't focus. All he could see in his mind was that bull, Hellspike, kneeling like he knew something. Something. Wade had tried to forget. He adjusted his collar and avoided the eyes of a young reporter asking about Luke's last ride. "No comment," he said flatly. That night, Claire stood by the old cassette player, fingers hovering. She pressed play. Luke's voice crackled through the speakers, soft, serious. "If you're hearing this, darling, then something went wrong. And there's something I need to tell you about Hellspike, about me, and about the deal I made." The tape hissed for a second before Luke Bennett's voice came back to life, grainy and quiet, like a ghost echoing through the kitchen. Claire stood frozen, one hand clutching the edge of the table. "Claire," Luke's voice began, "if I didn't make it, if that ride ended me, it wasn't just bad luck. Hellspike isn't just another bull. There's something in him. Something old. I saw it the first time I rode him at Buffalo Skull Arena. I didn't tell anyone because I knew no one would believe it." Claire dropped into the nearest chair. Her hand shook as Luke's voice continued. "It's in his eyes. He looked at me like he knew who I was. Not just my name, but everything. My regrets, my fears, even my lies. Especially the lies." "Claire," there's something I did. Back in '92, at the Dead Man's Canyon Arena, that's when all this started. The tape clicked and stopped. No explanation, no confession, just silence. Across town, Tommy had driven out to Sagebrush Hollow, Rodeo, where he was scheduled to train with his rival, Tanner Brody, but his head wasn't in it. He kept seeing his mother in that arena, her hand on that bull. Tanner sneered. "You're shaking. Scared of your mama's new pet?" Tommy ignored him, but something dark was building inside. He didn't know what was worse, the secrets his father left behind, or the way Claire seemed to be unraveling trying to chase them. Meanwhile, at the Broken Cross Stampede grounds, Sheriff Rick Dalton met privately with Wade Harris. "You knew something, Wade," Rick said, voice low. "Back then. After Luke's death, that ride wasn't just a freak accident." Wade leaned back, eyes narrowing. "You ever ask yourself why Hellspike never took another rider seriously? After Luke, why he went wild? That bull is grieving, Rick. Same as the woman. That ain't normal." Rick didn't blink. "And you think that's all there is to it?" Back at the Bennett ranch, Claire sat by the window, watching the horizon darken. She held the tape in her lap, replaying Luke's words in her mind. Especially the lies. What lie? What happened at Dead Man's Canyon Arena? Her chest tightened. She wasn't sure what was more terrifying, that her husband had kept secrets, or that a bull might be the only creature left who knew the whole truth. That night, in the barn, Hellspike stood eerily still, his eyes fixed on the horizon as if waiting, watching. Something was coming, and deep in her heart, Claire knew. Whatever had started years ago hadn't ended with Luke's death. It was only just beginning. The sun was barely up when Claire pulled her truck off the gravel road and stopped in front of the rusted gates of Dead Man's Canyon Arena. The place hadn't hosted a real event in years, closed after a series of accidents that locals still whispered about in bars and barbershops. Weeds grew through the cracked concrete, and the wind carried the sound of old banners flapping in the silence. She stepped out, holding Luke's cassette in one hand, as if it might answer whatever the arena still remembered. Inside the crumbling announcer's booth, Ethel May Brooks sat sipping lukewarm tea. She'd worked the rodeo circuit for 50 years, back when Luke was still a skinny hothead with something to prove. When she saw Claire approach, she didn't look surprised. "He told you about this place?" she asked. Claire nodded slowly. Ethel gestured to the dusty seat across from her. "You know, he came back here after the ride, alone, sat where you sittin', stared at the ring for hours." Claire leaned in. "What happened here, Ethel?" The old woman set her cup down and looked her dead in the eyes. "There was a boy, 19, new to the circuit, full of fire. Rode Hellspike before Luke ever did, first one to try. The bull crushed him, killed him. But here's the thing. That bull wasn't supposed to be here. He wasn't even on the roster. Luke brought him in. At that same moment, Tommy was back home, standing in Luke's workshop, staring at a photo he'd never noticed before. It was tucked behind a rusted buckle, a faded snapshot of Luke standing beside a young man who looked eerily familiar. On the back, a scribbled note. Dusty, the future of the circuit. Tommy felt his stomach twist. He'd never heard that name. And it wasn't the bull. It was the boy. Elsewhere, Wade Harris was sweating bullets in the boardroom of Silver Bridal Showgrounds, where a major sponsor had pulled funding due to recent strange press. He stared at a photo from Dead Man's Canyon that had resurfaced online. Luke and that same mystery rider, standing by Hellspike's pen. He picked up the phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in a decade. "It's unraveling," he said. "She's digging." Back in the shadows of the empty arena, Claire stood in the middle of the dirt ring, looking down. There, faint but real, was a worn stain in the ground. Old blood, never fully washed away. As the wind kicked up, A chill ran down her spine. She wasn't just chasing ghosts. She was about to uncover one. The air inside Dead Man's Canyon Arena had shifted. Claire felt it in her bones as she stood there, staring at the blood-stained dirt like it could speak. She knelt, brushing her fingers across the dry earth. There was a silence here that didn't feel natural, a silence that held its breath. She whispered, almost afraid to hear herself, "Dusty. Who are you?" The name on the back of the photo echoed in her mind like a thunderclap, and suddenly, the bull's loyalty felt less like mystery and more like memory. At the Bennett ranch, Tommy had the photograph in hand, pacing back and forth in the barn while Hellspike watched from his pen. The bull's eyes were dark, still, but tracking him. Tommy stopped. "You knew him, didn't you?" he muttered. "Dusty." Saying the name made something shift in the air. The bull's muscles tensed, head lowering slightly. Tommy blinked. "What are you, huh? Some kind of ... reminder?" He didn't know why he said it, but the words hit hard in his chest. Back at Dead Man's Canyon, Claire returned to the announcer's booth, where Ethel May Brooks was digging through an old metal file cabinet. "I figured you'd want to see this," Ethel said, handing Claire a dusty manila folder. Inside were registration documents, dated 1992. Rider, Dustin Cole. Age, 19. Bull, Hellspike. Outcome, fatal. Claire felt her throat close. Dustin ... Dusty. She turned the page. Listed as emergency contact, Luke Bennett. Her hands went cold. Asterisk. Wade Harris stood outside Thunder Rock Ranch Rodeo, smoking a cigarette and watching the horizon. He knew it was only a matter of time now. Claire was getting close. He'd warned Luke back in '92 that bringing in an untrained bull, especially one like Hellspike, would end in disaster. Said Dusty was ready. Said he owed him a shot. But after the death, Luke changed. Quiet, haunted, and Wade, he covered it up. Pay people to forget. And now it was crawling back out of the grave. Tommy drove fast toward Lone Mesa Rodeo grounds, where his next scheduled ride was. But his head was spinning. Dusty, the file, Hellspike's reaction, his father's voice on the tape. A line repeated in his memory, especially the lies. What if Dusty wasn't just another rider? What if he was more than that? A half-brother? A best friend? Someone Luke never told them about? The questions gnawed at him like barbed wire. Back at the arena, Claire closed the folder slowly. She looked out over the ring one last time and whispered, "You didn't just die here, Dusty. You stayed." And as she turned to leave, she didn't see Hellspike standing outside the fence, still, like a statue, eyes fixed on her, as if he too was waiting for her to finally understand the whole truth. Tommy stood in the locker room at Lone Mesa Rodeo grounds, staring at his reflection in the mirror. He couldn't shake the image of that photograph. His father with Dusty. There was something about the way Luke's arm was wrapped around the young man's shoulder, proud and protective. Not like a mentor, like family. Tommy clenched his jaw, reaching into his bag and pulling out the photo again. "Who the hell were you to him?" He asked the image, but deep down, he already knew the answer. Back at the ranch, Claire had spread out everything she'd collected on the kitchen table. The registration form, the photo, the cassette. A second letter had been tucked in the folder from Ethel, written by Luke, sealed, never mailed. It read, "I never told her. Couldn't. Dusty was my son, not hers. I made a mistake back then. I thought I could protect everyone by burying it. But Dusty deserved more. He deserved to live." Claire dropped the letter, her breath caught in her throat. Luke had a child before her at Whiskey Gulch Roundup. Wade Harris was drinking alone in the back office. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands shaking. He thought he could bury it all, The cover-up, the guilt, the silence. But now Claire was digging. Tommy was asking questions, and that damn bull was acting like he was possessed by the past. He poured another glass, but it didn't help. Nothing helped. He reached for his phone, heart pounding, and left a voicemail for Sheriff Rick Dalton. "We need to talk. Now. I can't carry this anymore." Meanwhile, Hellspike had begun pacing, restless, unsettled, at the dust-turned stockyard, where he'd been temporarily moved for safety. No handler could calm him. His usual fury was replaced by something more desperate, like he was trying to get back to something. Or someone. Caleb Morris, the vet, noticed the change and muttered, "He's grieving again. But for who this time?" Claire, holding Luke's letter to her chest, walked slowly to the barn. She found the stall where Hellspike had once stayed. During the off-season, empty now but full of memories. She knelt in the straw, eyes stinging. "You protected him," she whispered. "Dusty, you remember." She understood now. The bull hadn't bowed to her because of Luke. He bowed because of what she wore, the jacket. The same one Dusty had borrowed the day he died. And far from there, under the lights of Lone Mesa, Tommy mounted his bull for the night's ride, unaware that before the night was over, the truth about Dusty wouldn't just haunt them. It would demand justice. The crowd at Lone Mesa Rodeo grounds roared as Tommy Bennett adjusted his grip on the bull rope. He wasn't riding just for points tonight. He was riding for answers, and for a ghost whose name no one had spoken for years. The announcer called his name, but Tommy barely heard it. All he could hear was the cassette tape playing over and over in his mind. Dusty deserved more. The gate flew open, and the bull beneath him launched into the air. But this time, Tommy held on with something more than strength. He held on with fury. Back at the Bennett ranch, Claire was on the phone with Sheriff Rick Dalton, her voice shaking. "I found the letter." Luke lied. Dusty was his son, his blood. Rick's silence on the other end said everything. Finally, he answered. "Wade knew. We all knew. We just didn't know how to face it after Dusty died." Claire clenched her fists. "You covered it up. We tried to protect Luke's reputation, but it wasn't right." Claire hung up, her heart racing. It wasn't just a secret. It was betrayal. Tommy stayed on the bull a full 8 seconds. When the buzzer rang, he flew off and hit the dirt hard, rolling. The crowd cheered, but Tommy didn't celebrate. He stood, limping slightly, and walked straight to the holding pens. There, in the last stall, was Hellspike, staring at him through the bars. The bull didn't flinch, didn't rage. He just watched. Tommy leaned close and whispered, "He was your rider too, wasn't he?" "Dusty." Hellspike exhaled, slow and deep, and Tommy knew. Somehow, impossibly. The bull remembered Dud at that same moment. Wade Harris arrived at the arena, panic in his eyes. He pushed through the crowd toward the pens, only to find Claire already standing beside Tommy. She held Luke's letter in one hand and Dusty's photo in the other. "Tell him," she said to Wade. "Tell him what you did." Wade swallowed hard, sweat beading on his forehead. "I didn't mean for it to happen. I just looked the other way." Luke was desperate. Dusty wanted to ride, and Hellspike wasn't ready. Tommy turned, his voice cold. "So you let my brother die?" Wade shook his head. "We thought the bull was controllable. He was young. He'd shown promise. But Dusty, he didn't stand a chance." The truth hung in the air like thunder. Hellspike slammed against the stall gate once, not out of rage, but like a final, wordless judgment. And at that moment, Claire knew. The time for silence had ended. The name Dusty would never be hidden again. The morning after the confrontation at Lone Mesa Rodeo grounds, the town was buzzing. Whispers had spread fast. Dusty wasn't just a tragic footnote. He was Luke Bennett's son. People spoke his Mame like they were trying it out for the first time in decades. At the Sagebrush Hollow Rodeo, old-timers sat in silence, remembering that stormy night in '92 when a rookie disappeared from the record books and a bull began a legend soaked in blood. Claire stood in front of the memorial wall at Iron Spur Arena, a plaque in her hands. It had been commissioned overnight with money from her own savings. It read, "In memory of Dustin Cole, son, rider, brother, lost but never forgotten." She drilled the final screw into the wood herself. Her hands didn't tremble. This time, she wasn't grieving. She was reclaiming a name that should have never been buried. Around her, people gathered in silence, heads bowed. Some cried. J.J. Jacobs removed her cowboy hat and whispered, "About damn time." Tommy leaned on the fence near Hellspike's pen, staring into the bull's deep, unreadable eyes. "You carried it too, didn't you?" he muttered. His pain. My father's silence, all of it. The bull didn't move, but he didn't need to. Tommy placed Dusty's photo, now restored and laminated, on the post just above the gate. He was your rider, and now he's finally home. Then, for the first time, Hellspike let out a long, low groan, almost a sigh, and turned away, as if letting go. Wade Harris stood before Sheriff Rick Dalton, hands in his pockets, face hollow. "You gonna charge me?" Rick looked out over the arena. "No, there's no legal code for silence and cowardice, but you'll live with it. That's the sentence." Wade nodded once, not fighting it. His career was over, his reputation shattered. But the truth, finally, had found daylight. That was something. Maybe not enough, but something. That afternoon, Claire found Tommy sitting in Luke's old workshop. He looked up, his expression softer than it had been in years. "You think he loved Dusty?" he asked. Claire nodded. "I think he loved both of you, just differently. And he didn't know how to live with the mistake he made." Tommy looked down. "Neither do I." She sat beside him. "Then maybe we don't try to live with it. Maybe we just let it rest." Outside, the wind picked up, and in the distance, Hellspike stood at the top of a hill near the ranch, alone, still, watching the horizon like he had done for years, waiting for peace. And now, maybe, it had finally arrived. 3 months later, the dust had settled, but the story hadn't faded. At Buffalo Skull Arena, a special tribute was organized. For the first time, Dusty's name would be announced over the loudspeakers, not as a statistic, but as a son, a brother, a rider whose story had finally been told. The crowd stood in silence as Claire walked to the center of the ring with Tommy by her side. She held Luke's jacket, the same one Dusty had worn that day, now restored, clean, and worn like a symbol of healing instead of grief. As the announcer's voice echoed, Hellspike was led gently into the arena one last time. The crowd hushed. The bull, older now, slower, didn't buck. He didn't stomp. He walked with quiet power to the center of the ring, then stood completely still. Claire approached, tears welling in her eyes. She reached out, placing her hand on his massive shoulder. "You carried all of it," she whispered. "You were the only one who never forgot him." Hellspike let out a soft snort, as if in response. Then, slowly, he turned his head and touched his horn to Luke's jacket. One final gesture of recognition. Tommy watched in silence, one hand gripping the fence. For the first time, he felt pride not rooted in comparison or anger. It wasn't about being better than his father or escaping his shadow. It was about understanding it. "You were both broken in different ways," he whispered under his breath. "But you both tried." He stepped into the ring, placed his hand on Claire's shoulder, and for the first time in years, they stood side by side, not as mother and son separated by grief, but as family, united by truth. After the ceremony, Wade Harris quietly handed over a folder of forgotten records, finally doing what he should have done decades ago. "Let his story live," he told Claire. She took the papers without a word, just a quiet nod. Closure didn't need apologies. It needed action. That night, she and Tommy created a new corner at the ranch. A wall of photos, buckles, and Dusty's name in bold letters. A new chapter. In the Bennett legacy, weeks later, Hellspike was released into open pasture. No ropes, no fences. He walked alone to a high ridge overlooking the land, the same one Dusty once trained on. There, he remained, like a guardian watching over a story finally made whole. He never returned to the rodeo. No one asked him to, and sometimes, when the wind shifted just right across Iron Spur Arena, those who listened closely swore they could still hear the rhythm of hooves and a young voice laughing. Dusty never truly left. He just waited to be remembered.